OK, we've got time for a bonus choice, so let's see what Richard went for.
Anecdotes. Now, I don't have any anecdotes, but I've heard them, and I've often heard people retell an anecdote, knowing that I've already heard that anecdote, if a new person enters. So I'd say that specific category of someone just going, I'm sorry, you've heard this before, and then doing the same thing while you're there, because I feel I ought to be able to flip channel at that stage. So it's more of a subset of anecdotes, which is repeating it in the company of someone you've already told that anecdote to.
Yeah, I mean, if I do that, I often try and throw in something extra just for them.
Yeah, and that's humane, that's nice.
Yeah. But sometimes it's got to be done, because when you've got a beauty, you've got to share.
I've just never had anything worth repeating.
Have you ever sat in a room with comedians swapping anecdotes, as it were?
No, I don't think I have. I've been asked to leave rooms of comedians. But no, not really. Not like a full kind of... Especially when people stand up for them and, you know, clear a space, then I'm worried.
When I get anxious is when people say, you'll love this. And I always think, please never, ever start an anecdote like that. Or they'll say, oh, funny thing happened to me. And I always say, well, I'll be the judge of that. So just put them on the back foot. It's good.
I think once you start an anecdote, you have a duty. If you've got an audience, i.e. a few people listening to you, you have a duty then to make it as interesting as possible and make it as snappy as possible. And it's very annoying when your other half is near you and they decide to start interrupting and correcting what might be slight mistruths that you're just using to pepper the story and give it a little bit more oomph, you know?
Okay.
Because nobody's getting hurt in the telling of this anecdote, you know? We don't need to be so
This is a very roundabout way of telling him this.
Well, you've been told.
Have you ever been with those couples when one of them wrestles the anecdote off the other halfway through?
Yeah.
Often their wife. They'll let their wife do all the hard yakka at the beginning, the setup, the characters, and then they'll come in towards the end and get all the glory.
Morecambe and Wise. That's what... whenever they're on a chat... I remember Eric Morecambe being on a chat show and there was some story and he said, you tell it, Ernie, I'll interrupt and get a couple of laughs. Which, in a way, is quite a good description of their relationship.
I think with anecdotes, you've got to be precise.
But I just feel there's something about suddenly telling someone a thing with the confidence that they're going to enjoy it, where I just go, because I'm counter-suggestible, I'll go, I'm out. I'm out of this. I don't need to be here. That's what I think. I think this exists independently of me. Type it up, and I'll read it when I'm on the tube. Because I don't need this to exist in real time.
But if you laugh at it on the tube, he'll be absolutely furious.
I've got a friend who tells an anecdote, and I have to kind of go against your subsection because I could listen to this story almost every day, and it's the story of how this guy's dad lost both his thumbs.
I like it so much. How does he read on the beach?
Does he laugh as soon as he announces it as that story? You'll love this.
He tells it with wide-eyed enthusiasm and wonder every time. Basically, this guy worked in a sawmill in New Zealand, and he one day was cutting a piece of wood and chopped his finger off. About 6 months later, somebody else started at this sawmill, and they said, hey, Ched, how did you lose your thumb? And he said, oh, he goes, I did this, and he actually cut his other thumb while he was demonstrating what he'd done.
See, that's what I call an anecdote. Now, not the telling of that story, but the guy who, in order to give his anecdote real verve, actually reproduced the accident.
And at least that has a one-offness.
Well, a two-off.
Yeah. He hasn't done that before.
No.
He's not telling that anecdote a third time.
What about when people have said to me that something's happened with us and it's been funny, and they've said, oh, man, I've dined out on that story. And I always think, where? Have you ever gone into a restaurant and said, at the end of the meal, do you take anecdotes? And they say, I'll just get you the microphone, sir. Never.
Also, isn't there a feeling that if you've said something to someone within a conversation, that in some ways it's a betrayal of that moment to pimp out that narrative around the globe? To me, I feel it's a betrayal of the magical moments that I have in every interaction.
I was on Burnham Sands with my family and friends, and I got very thirsty. So I walked into someone's house. Their door was ajar. I walked into their house. They went, oh, Frank, you Frank Skinner? I said, yeah, I'm really thirsty, please. And they said, oh, well, what do you want? And I said, just water's fine. So they gave me water. And they were having their breakfast. And I said, I'm a little bit peckish. They made me a bacon sandwich. And then, as I was leaving, I thanked them, Andy and Shona, they were called. They said, do you want a can of Coke to take with you? And I said, oh, thanks very much. I said, this is really very kind of you. And Andy said, well, it's an anecdote, isn't it? OK, so, Richard, it's a bonus choice. It's going into room 101.